Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wassalatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this gathering and to bless these efforts and to help us come closer to Him. That is the intention, and we remind ourselves to purify the intention that we are here to learn how to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is the ultimate goal of this life and the next life. Last week we spoke about the types of selves, or at least one of the types of selves, and we said that the objective here is to understand the self which drives our behavior, right? And we said that the Quran categorizes humans into three selves. The first is nafs al-ammara bis-su, the self that kind of drives evil behavior, right, or inappropriate behavior. The second one is an-nafs al-lawwama, the self which we'll explain in momentarily, and an-nafs al-mutma'inna, and which we'll explain inshallah today, hopefully. And I mentioned that we are not, this isn't black and white categories, meaning you're in one of these three and that's it. Quite the contrary, we can be in all three, depending on where we're at emotionally. We could rotate between all three in one day, or in certain aspects of life we are one, and another aspect of life we are another self. So you can have all three of these dynamics playing out in a single individual. The goal obviously is to get to the nafs al-mutma'inna, to get to this self that is the tranquil self in all aspects of life, and that is a lifelong struggle, right? And this book tries to drive us towards that. So today we'll start first with the nafs al-lawwama, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath by in the beginning of Surah al-Qiyamah when He says, La uqsimu bi yawm al-qiyamah wa la uqsimu bin nafs al-lawwama. I take an oath, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath by the day of judgment, and He also takes an oath by this self that is lawwama. And the scholars differed upon what this means. And one opinion is that it comes from al-lawm, which is blame. So the self tends to blame itself. We've all experienced this. Even children experience this. When we make a mistake, when we fail to achieve something, when we fall short, we tend to look at ourselves and start blaming ourselves. I'm not worthy enough, or I'm not smart enough, I'm not strong enough, I made this mistake, it's my fault. We have this tendency. And as you know, sometimes that can go overboard to where a person falls into depression because of that. And for other people, they'll tend to just kind of ignore it, right? Their reaction to that, they try to protect themselves, they try to protect their emotional state by pushing it away. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking an oath by it. I mean, it means it's pretty important. This is a part of the self that's important. But for us, it's about understanding it and then internalizing it and using it in a manner that gets us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Allah created us this way, and He created us this way for a wisdom. And therefore, it's not correct to push it away or to ignore it or to consider it to be something negative. Rather, we embrace it by understanding it and then utilize it in a manner that gets us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the same for all emotions. We don't like to feel sad, but Allah created us with this emotion, and He created that emotion with a wisdom. Therefore, it would be inappropriate to just push it away. Rather, embrace it in a way where we can convert it or transform it into a spiritual experience, right? So the first opinion is that we blame ourselves. Now, remember, we are in the unit of Tawbah, repentance, and we have begun to understand why it's so important in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's this driving force, it's this channel between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's constantly pushing us towards Him, constantly reminding us of the goal at hand, to come closer to Allah, to make it to paradise. Well, one of the most profound ways, the most detectable ways of doing that is when we start blaming ourselves. When we fall into a mistake, right? Let's say we do a sin, we start blaming ourselves. How did this happen? I fell into this. I feel so bad. Where's my iman? Right? We have this tendency. I'm sure you've all experienced this. When you do even for someone who's not accustomed to doing sin, when they do a sin, it's like, wow, what happened? And this feeling of regret, blame, this is my fault. Healthy, because this was the practice of Adam alayhi salam. قَالَ رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. Adam and Eve, they said, oh Allah, we have wronged ourselves. They blamed themselves. But what did they do after? They converted it, right, into a supplication, oh Allah, وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. And if you don't forgive us and have mercy on us, we're going to be of the losers. They took that regret, transformed it into a supplication, which was therein accepted, thus removing the negativity of what they did, but also bringing them that much closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we see when it comes to dua, when a person makes dua, right? When a person makes dua, for example, oh Allah, provide me, help me succeed in my education. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's the most generous, when He answers a supplication, He doesn't just answer it at face value, meaning he asked or she asked for this, and that's all I'm giving them. That's not generosity. Generosity is when you go above and beyond that. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts a supplication, He gives more than what was asked for. So when Adam and Eve made that supplication, Allah forgive us and have mercy on us, not only did He forgive him, He made him into a prophet, guidance for all of mankind, right? And He, made amongst His children prophets, and He promised to always make among His children those who are calling to guidance, right? And that forgiveness will always be. So much good came out of it, to where that mistake, because of the supplication, because it was dealt with in a spiritually healthy manner, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala converted that mistake into a blessing. So earth, which He was sent down to initially as a punishment, right, because he made the mistake, because he reacted properly, that punishment was converted into a great blessing. That we utilize this life was meant as a phase, which was always the plan, right? But these are teaching us the elements of Tawbah, the elements of our engagement with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? This life was then made into a phase in which we learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we get closer to Allah, we deal with the burdens of this life, so that when we return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only is there already a relationship there, but we will look forward to being back with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we look forward to being His neighbor, and paradise will be that much sweeter, right? Whereas without that, we may not have attained it. Or at least paradise may have been a great blessing, but not as much as those who are patient with this life and then go back to it as a blessing. So that is the first opinion, that it is the self blames itself. The second opinion is that it goes back and forth. Lawama, yalumu, from one place to another. So it's constantly going back and forth. One day our iman is strong and high. The next day our iman is weak and low, right? One day we feel motivated. The next day we feel lazy. This is the self, right? It goes up and down, kind of like a pendulum. That's how it is. And the Prophet ﷺ describes us in that manner. And the companions felt this and they went through this, right? Some of them would actually make a dua, supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they pass away in a state where their iman is high. They were afraid of passing away when their iman was low, because it might take away from their reward and their position in paradise. Also, the Prophet ﷺ says that a believer is like a certain plant. Wind comes and it kind of blows this plant down a little bit. But the nature of that plant is that it doesn't break. It kind of just goes down, and then the wind stops, and then it goes back up, and another wind comes and blows it back down, and then it stops and goes back up. This is a believer. The wind is referring to the trials and the hardships of life, our mental or emotional challenges and whatnot. Whereas the hypocrite is another type of plant where when the wind comes, it's always standing firm, but when a strong enough wind comes, it just breaks and falls down. So it is part of iman to do this. It is part of iman that sometimes we fall short. It's part of iman to fall short sometimes. And understand this correctly. Sometimes, and maybe perhaps I mentioned this in a previous talk, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put the individual in a situation where they're bound to make a mistake, bound to sin, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that person to feel a burn of the sin, so that they re-establish that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or when they do that sin, they end up making a supplication that will bring them a lot more good, as to where if it didn't happen, that good would not have come about, right? Don't get me wrong, doesn't mean go and sin and then it's not it. In order to achieve that, there needs to be that emotional state of sorrow and regret. If we are purposely doing sin, we're not going to feel that, and therefore it will only be a burden and a hardship upon our backs. But sometimes this happens. Why is this important to know? Because it helps us process the situation. Right? When someone is making dua day in and day out for something, to be alleviated from a certain hardship, to receive help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet they're not receiving anything, that could be very heavy on the heart. Like I'm making dua to you, O Allah, and I need this. I'm not asking for something random. I'm not asking for a pleasure or privilege. I'm asking for a necessity in life. Where's the answer? Well, we need to understand that there is more to gain from the dua than just the answering of the dua. There's a lot more that could be gained from that. Whereas if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were to answer right away, and sometimes He does, but if Allah were to answer right away, a lot of good would have been lost. It's about understanding these things, understanding these situations and processing it as to where the heart feels tranquility, as we'll get to inshallah momentarily. So this is the second opinion, that the self goes back and forth between its emotional, physical, iman states, and that is part of iman. It's about utilizing each state, each phase, wherever you are on this pendulum of iman, in a manner that gets you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if someone feels like they're in a low and they feel that sorrow, they feel sad, they feel unmotivated, well, there's a way we can utilize that to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? They say that if a person is going through a hardship, then they worship Allah by being patient. And if someone is going through adversity and they're flourishing and they have all these blessings, well, the way to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to be grateful. So whatever state you are in, there's a way to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that state, and we will go through through those various tools like tawakkul and patience, dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gratitude. We'll go through all of them throughout the book inshallah. The third and final state of the self, or the type of self, is an-nafs al-mutma'inna, which is mentioned at the end of Surah Al-Fajr when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyatuha an-nafs al-mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya. O tranquil self, return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala radiyatan mardiyya, when you are pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will be pleased by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah. This is the end goal, the fruits of attaining this type of self. It needs to be achieved. No one is born with this. It needs to be achieved, and it needs to be preserved, and it needs to be maintained. So someone who has reached this state, they're not, okay, I'm set, that's it, right? I got a guarantee. No, we need to constantly preserve that, and we will get to that inshallah either the end of this lecture or the next one. This is the self. If we are able to attain tranquility, as I'll explain in a moment, the fruits of that is that we will be pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does that mean? I'm pleased with Allah. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the companions by saying, radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. Allah is pleased with them, and they are pleased with Allah. What does it mean to be pleased with Allah? And by the way, Allah praises them in this manner at the very end of the story of the Quran, close to the end. Right, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, the end of Surah Al-Ma'idah, which is one of the last chapters to be revealed in the Quran. Surah Tawbah, which was after the conquest of Mecca. So you're talking about after the 9th year of Hijrah. What else? Where else? And Surah Al-Bayyinah. So what that tells us is they struggled. They went through a lot in order to reach that level. Right? It's not something we gain overnight. It is a lifelong process. Right? And they sacrificed quite a bit, and they endured quite a bit. All the battles that they endured, immigration, poverty, hunger, they endured all that, but the end result was they were pleased with Allah, and Allah was pleased with them. So now, imagine that. They went through all those hardships. And these are, the top-notch hardships. I'm not talking about, man, my car isn't doing well, or I don't have millions of dollars, the hardships of the Western world. These are people who their lives were put on the line. They sacrificed literally everything they had for the cause of the religion. They were wounded, right? They became ill, etc., for the cause of this faith. And that's what they reached. But look what Allah says. They were pleased with Allah. Meaning they were pleased that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed these things upon them. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine? Remember in your own lives, a certain hardship you went through. Imagine a difficult one. And you then telling yourselves, I am pleased that Allah decreed that for me. That's not easy. That is heavy on the heart. But it's something worth struggling towards. Right? How did they attain that? What was it? Well, this tuma'nina, this tranquility that their selves had, that their iman reached. What does that mean? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ra'd, we all know this verse, we love it. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ طُوبَى لَهُمْ وَحُسْنُ مَآبٍ. Those who believe, right, and their hearts find rest or tranquility with Allah. Indeed, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find tranquility, right? What does this mean? Ibn Qayyim has a beautiful explanation for this. He says, look, the tranquility that's being referred to here is not necessarily a particular emotional state. Meaning, tranquility is not happiness. See, the problem in the West, the goal is always happiness, right? And that's a universal goal. And Islam provides that. But how do we define happiness? What is happiness? What you see in the West, the common understanding of happiness is feeling excited, feeling a high, right? Well, Islam doesn't define it that way. Islam defines happiness as the heart being in a state of tranquility, meaning feeling comfortable. I'm okay, right? I'm okay, I'm doing fine. You know that feeling sometimes when you get when you're anxious about something? Especially when we were younger, going to school and grades and whatnot. Oh my God, I didn't get a good grade. That feeling, that nervousness, right? The stress, that is an untranquil heart. But when you have the same situation, yet the heart feels at rest, that is a tranquility that this verse is talking about. That is happiness. That is true happiness. Because now the heart feels comfortable, it feels okay, right? As we'll get to. So, Ibn Qayyim says, assume that feeling of comfort, because tranquility, mutma'inna, right, means sukoon, means to be silent or to be still. So that we'll call that comfort. So imagine the heart in a state of comfort is in a center point. Emotions will come along and move the heart in a certain direction. Okay? So let's say happiness takes the heart up. Sorrow brings it down. Anxiety or being nervous takes it to the left, right? Or, for example, fear takes it in a certain direction. And you name it. All these different emotions are pulling the heart out of its resting point. Now, we can never prevent emotions, nor are we told to prevent emotions. Rather, what the Sharia does isn't prevent emotions. What it does, it limits the effects of those emotions on ourselves and our behavior. What does that mean? When you study psychology and you have this field called positive psychology or emotional psychology, you find that when they speak about psychology, yes, there are positive emotions, there are negative emotions. However, there's a principle that emotions in general are a double-edged sword. Meaning what's considered to be or classified as a positive emotion can harm the person. And what's considered to be a negative emotion can actually benefit the person, depending how it's used. So take happiness and excitement, right? When someone is very happy, excited, they're out of their mind, out of this world, right? What can happen then? they can forget prayer. Could happen. Take a look at weddings, right? Weddings, you see this a lot in weddings. They go all out, the excitement. They might forget about prayer, right? They might do stuff that's forbidden. You know, in the Arab world, sometimes a lady who's wearing hijab will take off her hijab in front of everyone for the wedding, right? This happens. And it's funny because when I talk to the Arab group, some of them start, they have that face like, oh, I'm guilty of this, right? That happiness harmed them. Their happiness caused their heart to be untranquil, right? Sorrow can lead to the same thing, right? That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly tells the Prophet in the Quran, La tahzan, don't be sad, don't be sad, don't be sad. Because that sorrow can drain, it can suck the life of the person, and it can lead them to depression. And when they're depressed, I'm not going to pray anymore. I just don't have the motivation to pray. I don't have the motivation to do this or that. It harms them. Anger. The Prophet ﷺ advises one of his companions who came to him and said, Ya Rasulullah, awsini, or Messenger of Allah, give me advice. He said, La taghdab, don't become angry. He said, okay, next, give me another piece of advice. Don't become angry. A third piece, don't become angry. This person was known to have a big temper, right? And when he has this temper, he starts doing things that's impermissible. He starts transgressing the rights of other people. Does it make sense? Don't become mad. Because anger can cause us to go away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any emotion can do that. But at the same time, all these emotions can help us get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we are happy because of some sort of accomplishment or some sort of blessing. Well, how do we convert that into something spiritual? Gratitude, right? If you feel happy, be grateful. That is a high level of spirituality. It's a high station, an important one. Because when you are grateful, you'll remember the one who blessed you with that. And then you will thank him, causing your heart to submit more to Allah, causing it to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that much more. If we feel sorrow, then what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does the Sharia advise us in this regard? Well, you have many things. You have dua. If you feel sad, express your sorrow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what Yaqub alayhi salam did. قال إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. Yaqub alayhi salam, when he was crying because of being away from Yusuf alayhi salam for all those years, and now his other son Benjamin is also now missing, or not missing, but in Egypt, away from him. He started crying, and his children, his grandchildren, started telling me, it's enough. Yusuf has been gone for decades. You're going to continue to cry? So what was his response? He said, I express my sorrow and grief to Allah. He took that, utilized it in an effective manner that not only satisfied that emotion, but also brought him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it comes to anger, what does the Sharia teach us? If a person is angry, then if they're standing up, they should sit down. This is the advice of the Prophet ﷺ. If they're sitting down, they should lay down, right? That's advice to minimize it. And now you are obeying the Prophet ﷺ, you're getting reward, and you're utilizing that. Right? No matter what the emotion is, the Sharia provides us with practices that will prevent these emotions from driving our behavior in a negative manner. Rather, it takes it and drives the behavior in a positive manner. Also, it helps us limit the extent of these emotions on the self. So the stronger our belief is in Allah, the more we understand Him, what you find is that these emotions have less of an effect on us. Right? So for example, going back to the concept of failing a test. Let's say it's something like the MCATs or the DATs or the LSATs, right? For the law, right? They failed it. But they have a strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning there's that trust element. For them, it's not, oh my God, what am I going to do now? For them, it's قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَاءَ وَفَعَلَ. Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed this, and He chose what's best for me. Although I see this to be negative, my understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His history with me shows me that He always takes me to the better choice. And if I am unable to pass this exam and get into the profession that I was seeking, then I know, right, based on what I know from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is a good that's going to come behind this. That's very different than someone who's completely attached to that goal, as to where if they are unable to achieve it, they completely break down, right? Someone who's so attached to money that if they lose money, it's as if they lost everything. And some will commit suicide, right? There's a big difference here. So what you find is that the Sharia teaches us, molds our minds, gives us a perspective on life, that provides us with practices that will always take our heart back to a state of tranquility, right? And this requires practice. It's not something that's going to come about. It requires practice. But man, is that satisfying? Man, is that a blessing? It is happiness that all people are looking for. And it is the type of happiness that always kept a smile on our Prophet ﷺ's face. You know, we all know this. It said that he always had a smile on his face. Was he the richest person alive? Was his life the most comfortable life? Not at all. He lost his dear wife Khadija at a time where he was most in need of her. He lost his uncle who supported him. It was his political shield, right? He lost 6 of his children in his life. 6. He saw his close friends killed in battle. He saw the suffering of his dear friends, right? He saw so many things, yet he always had a smile on his face. Where is that coming from? The tranquil self. You know, he's the role model in that regard. Despite all the hardships he went through, he was able to process all of that in a way that brought a smile to his face. That's, subhanAllah, that is the universal goal. And that's not just unique to our Prophet ﷺ. You know, it's said that the Christians were like that. I'm talking about the followers of Isa ﷺ, right? His disciples. That despite being tortured, being persecuted, right, being, you know, killed, they seemed happy. Despite the hardships that they went through, it only increased their iman. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows the companions were like that as well. What is it? What's the secret? You know, it's unbelievable, right? It's unbelievable how they were able to attain such an emotional state. Everyone wants that. And prophets provide that. And that's why religion is so attractive to many people. That's why when they go through an emotional crisis, they look back to religion. They go through a hardship, they go back to religion, because it's able to offer the individual an understanding, a perspective on what happened to them, or the hardship that they are going through, that will bring satisfaction to the heart. Right? So those are the 3 selves, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among, you know, the one that is tranquil, and to protect us from the evils within ourselves, and to help us convert, you know, that back and forth element of our personalities and our faith in a manner that gets us closer to Him. So that is the self, and that we are looking at Tawbah, we are looking at sins in a way that shows us what's driving us towards it, the 3 selves. Next, we are looking at a different element that causes sin, and that is foreign and external to the self, and that is the shaitan, the devil. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّا أَرْسَلْنَا الشَّيَاطِينَ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ تَؤُزُّهُمْ أَزًّا. Have you not seen that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the devils upon the disbelievers? They kind of whisper to them, and they whisper to them in a way that moves their behavior towards that which takes them away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course He does that with the believers too, and that is the promise, or that is the promise of Satan, that he will go after the children of Adam until they disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's successful on a great scale, but he's unable to harm the believers, those who are sincere amongst them. However, what we're looking at here is this element, this external element that tries to get us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when you analyze this individual, right, we come to see that Satan is not a fool, he's not an idiot, he has a strategy, right? He has observed humans long enough to know their behavior and their weak points and how to get them away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the things that he knows is that he cannot just tell someone to disbelieve and they're going to say, you know what, Eureka, I'm going to disbelieve. It's not going to happen. Someone who's praying 5 times a day, fasting Ramadan, is not going to leave that all of a sudden. There are other things that need to happen. So, what are the goals of the shaitan? And we're going to start from his primary goal and go down. So, the further down we go, the more relevant it will be to us. Number 1, his primary goal is to cause the individual to disbelieve. To disbelieve, and the word kufr, right, causes them to become kuffar. The word kafara means to cover up. So it is used to refer to a farmer who plows the land, plants the seeds, and then covers those seeds. That process is called kufr. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses it in its linguistic manner in the Quran once. كَمَثَلِ غَيْثٍ أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَّارَ نَبَاتُهُ. Like the example of heavy rains which pleases the kuffar, which are farmers here, right? And when you go to the Arab world, I was always confused by this in the beginning. You find villages are called kufr so-and-so, kufr so-and-so. Like, what's the deal with these villages, man? Are they that bad? No, they're using it in a linguistic manner, the farming place of this land, or this city, or this village, right? So, shaitan wants the person not just to disbelieve, he wants them to do kufr, to reject Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's different than just saying, you know what, I'm not interested in this. And that's definitely a goal, but it's different than someone saying, you know what, I reject this. Like an atheist who says, I reject the existence of God. Or someone who knows that the Quran is the truth, but says, I reject this book. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the previous nations, once the Quran came, they said, we reject this. We're just going to stick to the religion of our forefathers. But why did they reject it? Was it because they perceived it as being false? No, it's because they didn't feel like it was in their best interest. Hey, I have this position amongst my people, right? I'm getting all this fame and all this wealth because of it, and I have all this authority and this prestige. If I become a Muslim, well, all that is going to go away because there are more prestigious people than me. I'm just going to lose all of that. It's not in my best interest. Therefore, I'm going to reject and fight it. Not only just reject it, fight it. Right? That is what Satan wants. He wants us to misinterpret this world in a manner, or interpret it in a manner that depicts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as being imperfect and therefore easily rejected. So the whole notion of shirk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes after it in hundreds, if not thousands, of verses in the Quran, and considers it to be the ultimate sin. Well, why? Ibrahim alayhi salam enlightens us. It's a very beautiful verse. فَمَا ظَنُّكُمْ بِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Talking to his people and their theology, he said, what is your opinion of the Lord of the worlds? And then the verse stops. Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi says what? He continues what the verse is saying. He says, what is your opinion of the Lord of the universes that cause you to feel that you need to worship other than Him? Meaning, is Allah imperfect? He cannot satisfy all your needs and all your requests, that you need other gods to supplicate the Lord of the universe. Is that it? That's what shirk is. What is their belief? What is a pagan's belief in Allah, that they think that God needs more than one God, or that there are other gods? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala incapable of managing the world, that He needs, ministers and a cabinet to help Him run the universe? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unaware of all that's going on, and therefore needs people or needs other entities to inform Him what's going on, like a president or a king of a country? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does He not own the entire universe, that there are other people who rival Him in parts of these universes? What is it? What is causing a person to believe that there are other gods worthy of worship besides Allah? Because when you look at paganistic thought and ideology, you find that gods play different roles. This God is the God of love, and this God is the God of wealth, and this God is the God of rain. Well, can the God of wealth not provide rain? And can the God of rain not provide wealth? If they can, then that means they're incomplete. But we as Muslims believe what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is complete in every single manner. And therefore, right, it is a complete, we completely reject it. And we consider it to be depicting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or belief in Allah that shows that He is imperfect. And we completely reject that. Right? So Iblis wants that to happen. He wants people to view Allah in an inappropriate manner that depicts Him as being incomplete, and therefore unable to satisfy the individual's needs, that they need someone or something else. So look at one of the philosophical arguments. If God is almighty or all powerful, and God is all good, why is there evil? Look at that argument. Right? It's trying to depict God, that if there is a God, that He is not worthy of worship. When unfortunately a lot of Muslims today, especially in the West here, they go through some sort of hardship, they're unable to process why this is happening. Right? I made dua to Allah, He didn't answer it. Why didn't He answer my dua? Or why did Allah put me through this? Why is He doing this to me? Right? Well, the question is, who knows better? You or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Although the person won't come out and say, I know better. Of course they're not going to say that. What their response is indirectly saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not dealing with me in a correct manner. Now, don't exaggerate what I'm saying. I don't mean that these individuals who blurt this are disbelieving in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is one of the tricks of the shaitan, to try and get the person to slip and fall into disbelief, into rejecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? This is happening. Why is this happening to me? Right? Whereas the self that is tranquil submits to the idea, or submits to the reality rather, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what He's doing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more compassionate to the individual than the individual is to themselves. And you know what? We can even view this in our daily lives, or at least in our childhood with our parents. Right? When a parent punishes a child, why are you punishing me? Why this and why that? Well, later on they come to realize that, my parent was right. It is quite silly when a 3-year-old child starts telling their parents, oh, why are you doing this? What are you doing? Right? You don't know what you're doing, to their 40-year-old parent who's much more experienced in life, and they're sitting there questioning their actions. You don't have the experience. You don't have the knowledge to sit there questioning your father. Right? That's kind of a small example of how this works. But how about between us and the Lord of the universe, subhanahu wa ta'ala? So the first goal of the shaitan is to make us disbelieve. And he has his tricks, and he has his methods and strategies in that regard. Next is bid'ah, innovation. This word that's all too often thrown around in inappropriate and incorrect manners. Right? However, this is a longer, this requires some discussion here, so why don't we leave that for next week, inshallah. So number 2 is bid'ah. We'll talk about that. Jazakumullah khair. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.